All right, I'm now recording. So if you don't want to be recorded, you should probably leave, but please don't leave.
Please don't leave.
Go ahead, Dan. Take it away.
Well, welcome everybody to the Murray Amateur Radio Club's Thursday, March 18th club meeting here on Zoom. Thanks, Jan, for setting this up every week. It's a wonderful thing. Appreciate it. As I mentioned earlier, there was a choice between having a bug out EDC bag, communication bag ideas, or POTA and SOTA, the Parks on the Air and Summits on the Air. And the bug out bag discussion won out. So I think you're going to find this engaging. I hope to hear comments from everybody. And because I do want to hear your ideas. There's some ideas that I want to give you all. As I was perusing the YouTube channels, like I always do, I was looking at. I'll find out what his name is by the end of this class, but he's the one who actually gave a number of ideas to me, and so I need to give him credit. So I will do that. I'll make sure I put the credit out there on the presentation that will be on the website. Okay, so the slides that you're going to see are going to be just slightly different because I do want to thank him for kind of getting the ball rolling, as it were. A lot of this stuff is also a combination with the Safe Neighborhood program, and actually the presentation that I give to the wards in my stake on emergency preparedness. So it's kind of all globbed together. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen, and let's see, screen one, share. Can everybody see my screen? It should be a desktop. And I'm going to start the slideshow. And I'm going to swap presenter. Okay. So the name of the presentation is Bug Out or Get Home, Communication EDC Bag Ideas. EDC, of course, stands for Everyday Carry. So this is a type of thing where you would keep with you at all times, and we're going to talk about why. So what are we preparing for? And one of the things that was on his original presentation is that comment in green: keep it local, keep it real. And what that means is we need to be preparing for something that will happen in our area, and we need to keep it real. And by that, I took away that I probably should prepare less about the zombie apocalypse than a 7.0 earthquake. That's probably going to happen before the zombie apocalypse happens. So let's be realistic on what's going to what we should be planning for.
Well, they might happen at the same time. You don't know. I mean,
well, if they do happen at the same time, then what I'm going to explain is okay with either or. Okay, so much for keeping it real, Jan.
well, you know.
So what are the main things that we're going to be looking out for? Probably the most prevalent one, the one with the highest degree of probability, is going to be the earthquake. And Salt Lake County, with the Safe Neighborhood program and the emergency management, they are looking at a 7.0. They say that it will not get greater than 7.5, but it's, I don't know how likely I'm going to be listening to what my government says. But we do know that something big is going to happen. So that's certainly one. You have the earthquake, you have severe winter storms. That happens here. It used to happen. We could get extremely cold temperatures, minus 40 degrees. And that would cause a lot of disruptions. Flash flooding, that happens all the time. Severe thunderstorms and lightning, hazardous material spills. We have the I-15 corridor that almost anything drives down there, and it doesn't take much for one of these tankers to especially if it was some type of chemical agent, biohazard. There's a lot of people that will be disrupted with that, and of
the
course,
rail line also goes right up the middle of the valley too. So
exactly. And then you have the terrorism. Probably out of all of these, the one that's probably going to happen is the earthquake or the winter storms, that kind of stuff. The least thing that is probably going to happen, low probability, will be the terrorism, but we should never take that off the list, because that is always, as we can see, it has happened to us before, and it could happen to us again. It probably will happen to us again. So what could go wrong? What would happen in a 7.0 earthquake, for example? Well, how about the electrical grid? That'll go down. Our phone system will go down, our water system, sewer, and all municipal run services, fire, police, EMS. We're not going to be able to pick up the phone, call 911, and ask for help, because first of all, the phones probably are not going to be working. And second of all, fire and police will, those organizations cease to exist for the first 24, 48 hours, because the personnel are trying to get out of the, trying to get involved with, helping people. And so we may not see somebody for a long time. So let's talk about the 7.0 earthquake. What will be affected? Well, according to Salt Lake County, 350,000 people will be displaced, meaning that they will have no homes. Their homes will be unable to be inhabited. That's 80 to 85% of homes will sustain moderate to severe damage. And again, remember, this is a 7.0 earthquake. Most main roads and freeways will become unusable. As a matter of fact, many of them will become unpassable. So my question to everybody is, where will you be when all this happens? In previous training sessions, I have always thought, well, I'm going to be, the earthquake's going to happen at 4 a.m. I'm going to be home. Well, it may not happen at 4 a.m. It may happen at noon and I'm out to lunch, or it may be happening, anytime. So will you be at work? How far is your work from your home? Will you be home? You could be shopping, you could be visiting a friend in Ogden, or you could be completely out of Utah altogether. It makes a big difference on what you would carry based on where you'll be. So the EDC bag that we're going to talk about will address all of this stuff. So the first casualty of a catastrophic disaster is typically power, and consequently communications. Why communications? Well, it's tied to the grid, right? Power lines go down, the towers collapse, all kinds of fun stuff happens at a 7.0 earthquake. Texting services may be available, so that's one of the things that we should always keep in the back of our mind. Runners may provide local communications. As a matter of fact, in the pre-modern era, that was used exclusively. This cell phone stuff is only recent, within the last 75 years or whatever. For thousands of years, if I wanted to get a message to my neighbor, well, I'd have to go over and walk over and talk to my neighbor. Whether that neighbor is one one house away or the next town. It's just a matter of walking and passing communications that way. Well, the good news is amateur radio is almost always available. As a matter of fact, everybody's heard the mantra, when all else fails, amateur radio won't. And I believe that wholeheartedly. I've seen it. We've all seen it in action in major disasters, and it will be a key component in my bag that I have. So let's put the communications on the side for a second. Let's talk about what everybody needs to sustain life. Well, obviously there's water, food, and shelter. So can I have people kind of tell me their take on which one is most important? Give me an order of importancy here. I'm opening it up for general discussion.
Shelter.
I've always heard that you can go without air for about 1 minute, without water for about 1 day, without food for about 2 to 3 weeks if you have to, and depending on what the weather looks like, you may need shelter sooner or later. You'd have to figure out where that slots in. But
Tigger knows.
I'm sorry.
Tigger says
knows.
There's always mice, so he will be not afraid of food. So,
as a matter of fact, he'll be living high on the hog when the disaster happens, because the rat problem we're going to have is going to be crazy. Okay, so one person said shelter. Other people say water, food, and shelter. Any other ideas? And by the way, just so you know, Jan, it's a levels of 3. You can go 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, and I've been all my life without air in my brain. So there is
3 minutes without air, I guess, would be
3 minutes without air. Yeah. Okay, so in my estimation, shelter is the most important thing that you have to take in consideration right off the bat, because if it's 40 degrees outside or raining or both, and you become wet, you may not live 3 days with the lack of water. So in my guesstimation, shelter is primary, then water, then food. And I have stats to back that up if anybody wants to know. So one thing that is important then is that we carry these things with us, and communication makes coordination easier. And we'll talk about that. So let's talk about the 10 essential items, or the 10 basic things. And this is up for debate. This is just a couple of people's ideas. So first thing is understanding navigation, understanding how to look at a map and compass, which, by the way, is kind of a lost art nowadays because everybody has their GPS and phones. Sun protection, somebody put there, extra clothing, a flashlight, a first aid kit, and that could either be an IFAC or a PFAC. For extra credit, what is an IFAC or a PFAC?
Individual first aid kit.
I was just going to say, if you're in the army or the military, you'll know what this is. The individual first aid kit is an IFAC, and every soldier carries one. And its basic job is to stop the bleed. And what's the PFAC? It is like a boo-boo kit. It's a personal first aid kit versus an individual first aid kit. That seems similar, but a personal first aid kit really is just, it's where you have the non-essential first aid items like your Band-Aids, your moleskin, stuff that it's nice to have for typical first aid injuries. Then we have fire starters that are in the basic 10 essentials, a knife of some sort, food obviously should be there, water, including water purification methods, which let's get a couple of ideas what they are.
Well,
How can I purify water?
one way is to boil water. So if
Boil?
you've got fuel and some way to heat the water, then you could boil it. But that doesn't always get everything out. You probably want some kind of a filtration system.
Iodine tablets.
Iodine tabs and filtration. Yep. Those are three main type of water purification methods. Beautiful.
Or you could get lazy and just get yourself one of those survival straws.
Well, that's filtering.
Well, it's a filtration. Yeah, it is filtering.
Yep. Okay, so and then the other thing is rain gear or coats or jackets or whatever, depending on the season and the weather. Okay, so this is one person's idea. Your list will vary based on your needs and environment. We're going to talk about the 10 C's.
I have a point on Levi jackets.
Okay.
And that kind of gear. The Levi jacket got really popular, and found out that a lot of people using that for shelter and warmth. It's no good if it's wet.
Right.
And a lot of people have hypothermia, and they're wearing their warm leather or Levi jacket that's wet, and it's worse.
Yep, exactly. Thanks, Ragnar. Any cotton-based material loves to hold the moisture, but that's a whole other topic. But again, depending on the weather and season, will decide on what you take. As far as, again, this, you need to remember that we're talking about creating a kit that you take with you. So I'm obviously in the summertime, not going to take my down coat. Okay. I'm going to take a poncho for rain. I'm and probably a jacket with that. So anyway,
those little space blankets are amazing too. They fold up really small, they're really lightweight, and yet they can really keep you warm. So
we'll talk about keeping warm in a disaster scenario at another presentation, because there's some things that people, well, let's just take that off the table. Those Mylar blankets are good for a number of things, including like you see them in accident scenarios. We treat for shock. We use that to treat for shock and stuff. It keeps the patient warm, but as a long-term solution, it is a bad thing because it does not let any type of moisture out. And so you start sweating and then you get really cold. So there's ways to deal with all of that stuff. But we'll talk about that on another presentation. So with the 10 essentials, again, that's probably going to change for everybody. How do comms fit in, especially in an off-grid situation? Why do you want to have a communication ability? To find out where you're at, to get supplies, to find out the status of things, not only to give your status to somebody, but to find the status of locations and the environment and who knows whatever else. Coordination in requesting aid, organizing a meeting, whatever. So the question you have to ask yourself is, what do you normally communicate to others and why? Communication is universal needs, but your requirements may differ. For me, communication is just a very, very important part of this because getting recon information is just as important as talking to somebody who who may be in the know, which I might add, it doesn't have to be a two-way radio. Having a a wideband receive radio is also very, very important. Gathering information is just as important as transmitting information. So let's talk about communication priorities. I think the first priority that everybody probably will agree is communications on the VHF and UHF. It's pretty portable. We have our HTs. It's basically run on FM, so amateur, the ham radio bands. The FRS and GMRS radios are also FM. Then we also have APRS and packet data. Very, very useful. And then you have HF. Generally requires a larger antenna. But with that, you have a single sideband voice, you have data and CW. The data and CW tend to, well, not tend to, they will always be able to travel further with the least amount of wattage, which means that you don't have to carry a huge battery with you. The only problem with that is you got to have the equipment for the data, and you got to know CW if that's what you're interested in. So let's go ahead and put the communications off on the side for 1 second, because I want to talk about bugging out or getting home. So there's a difference between the two. Bugging out implies that you're going to leave your home and you're going to be living out of your bag. And typically you're going to be carrying it all with you, whether that's in a truck or your ATV or in a wheelbarrow or in a backpack. Then you have the idea of getting home, and that implies you only want to carry enough gear to get you home, where your better gear is stored. So this is why I wanted to give this presentation, is because everybody's heard of a bug out bag and everybody knows about bugging out. Well, maybe the best thing to do is to get home. If you can shelter in place, that's generally the best place to shelter. And so getting home is going to be, for me, a very important thing. As a matter of fact, get home is my priority, but what we talk about is can be covered in both cases with just a little bit of planning. So let's talk about getting home, or actually bugging out, because this works for both ways. Getting home philosophy or bugging out philosophy, you need to develop some couple of smarts about you. One is situational awareness. You want to keep your head on a swivel, and you want to avoid confrontation. The more you can keep away from the crowds, the better. Try to avoid confrontation almost at all costs, because when you have a major disaster, the Goonies come out, and there are many people that think that they did not prepare for the disaster, so they're going to take from you who did prepare. And that's a horrible truth, but a truth nonetheless. So this is why you need to have situational awareness. Also, it helps to be the gray man, meaning you don't stand out. You blend in with your surroundings, you dress down, you look like everyone else, and you don't call your attention to yourself. So I ask you, do you really want that molly military bag that screams, "Shoot me first"? And that's the same thing with dressing down. Am I going to wear my fatigues? Am I going to wear a military looking thing because someone else will think that you have some pretty good goodies in your bag, especially since your bag is all mollied out, and you probably have some cool stuff there. Most importantly, guns and ammo. Don't call attention to yourself. My suggestion is you leave the military looking stuff to the military. Another thing that is absolutely critical is have a plan. And not only that, but have an alternate plan. It may be that your primary plan can't work because of the situation. Oh, and here's a question for you. Does your loved one knows? Yeah, let me see if I can talk right. Does your loved ones know your plan? Do you know theirs? Create a plan, a meet to plan, whatever, before the disaster happens, so that everybody knows that if you are to work, and now fortunately, this COVID-19 thing has kind of forced everybody to have home offices. So in a sense, that's a good thing, but more and more people are returning to work. As you go out, if you're going to visit somebody, whatever, make sure someone knows where you're at, because if something happens, you'll be glad that someone knows where you're at. You may not be able to contact them, but if they have a radio and you have a radio, you might be able to contact each other. So what kind of bag are we looking for? Well, there's two different types. There's a backpack, and obviously with the backpack, you wear it on your back, and it's easy to carry, typically, but you typically have to take it off to get something. So it's not the most convenient thing, but it is best for long distances. You can pack a lot of stuff in there, and it's made for long distance travel. Then you have the other type, which is a messenger bag. The good thing about that, it has lots of pouches and organizational pockets. Typically, it's real easy to get things right away, but it's a bit cumbersome, and that bag is probably best for short distances. Whatever bag you choose, try to make it blend in, make it look like a school bag or something that does not scream military. So the question is then, do I need more than the 10 essentials? And my answer is, well, that depends. How far away will you likely be from home? What's the distance to your work? How about when you go shopping? How about when you're visiting friends? And it could be, a trip to Ogden or shopping at the mall here locally. You have to figure in your daily distance. How far can you walk with the 20-pound bag on your back? How many hours per day can you walk? And what about if you're injured? So the question is, do I need more than the 10 essentials? Because everything you put in the bag starts adding weight, correct? So that's something to take into consideration. And here's something that is very, very important. As an example, if I can travel 20 miles a day, and I'm typically 40 miles from home on a daily basis, that's like where I work, I need to plan for 2 days of travel. And of course, that's on a good day. Things change when the weather is minus 40 degrees, when you have impassable roads because of the 7.0 earthquake that messed everything up, and you no longer have distinguishing landmarks. So what should have taken you 2 days to travel the 40 miles might in reality take you a week or more. And so you need to put that into your planning, into what you're going to put and how much you're going to put in your bag. It's one thing to carry I have a Marmot 4-season tent that is made to go up to Mount Everest, but it's freaking heavy. And so would I carry that with me, or would I carry my single 3-season tent, especially now during the summertime? I'm probably going to pick for something light. Again, yeah, plus I have an injury. I have 2 broken legs that I traveling 40 miles, I can no longer do that, or 20 miles a day. I think I would have to hope to get 5 miles a day, especially if I'm carrying a 25, 30-pound pack. So all these things need to, you need to take into consideration. So
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
How many times do you go to Mount Everest?
3 times a week.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hey, in my universe, I go there 3 times a week. Okay. Okay. So there is a people who are into YouTube have probably heard, or at least are into the prepare culture, the 10 C's of survivability. And I'm going to add an 11th, and you'll see why. So the first thing here, first of all, there's the core 5 elements of survivability. They are items that would be difficult to reproduce in an outdoor situation if you already didn't have them. So that's why it's good to have these first 5 basic things. So where'd it go? Okay. So the most difficult thing to produce in an outdoor situation is a high quality knife or a cutting tool. A high quality knife, preferably in a sheath and strapped to your belt. Full tang for strength is also a great idea too. There's the combustion device. You need something that will start a fire, whether the environment is wet or dry. And of course, the ability and know-how to do it. It's one thing to have all these trinkets and baubles and gadgets. It's another thing to know how to use each one of those. So everything that I list here, just know that everything comes with training, okay? And you need to be proficient in all of this stuff. You have cover, whether that's a poncho, whatever it is, wool blanket, tarp, mylar foil blanket. Your clothes and outerwear are considered among the shelter category once you start digging into it. So cover and shelter are things to protect you from the elements. Then you have a container capable of boiling water, such as a single walled stainless steel. Also, a container is used for cooking. It, of course, enables water purification and cooking of your food. Again, you're probably not going to, if I'm 40 miles away, it's not going to be a 1 hour car ride to my house. It could be a week and a half before I get there. You have cordage. So rope, paracord, twine, something that will help facilitate the building a shelter. And of course, you use that for other uses. So those are the first 5 main core elements. And then we have things that go on that's nice to have. Candlelight, in other words, a flashlight or a headlamp and I like the headlamps because it's you have your hands free to do other stuff. Cargo tape, also known as duct tape. You can't go very long without needing or wishing you had duct tape. There's a zillion uses for it. A cotton bandana or similar. Why would you think you need a cotton material? What are some ideas or uses for a cotton bandana or a cotton towel?
You could use it for filtration. You could use it to make a sling. You could use it to put over your head if the sun's too hot. There's a lot of things you could do with it.
Perfect. Exactly. So a lot of these things, you want to think of multiple uses for them. Okay. So you don't have to take like a coffee filter is a great water filter for your first phase of filtering your water. Folding your cotton bandana over 4 times works almost as well. Okay, it gets the big chunks out. Then you have a compass. a quality compass for that matter, and a good quality map. Why do you think, and I kind of alluded to it before, is a compass kind of important? And most importantly, knowing how to run a compass.
It doesn't need batteries.
Does not need battery. Yep, exactly. And if you've been involved with the triangulation things that we did, we've had classes on orienteering and understanding what magnetic declination is. All that stuff needs to be part of your compass training. Then you have a canvas needle or small tools. Use the needles for repairs. Things are going to rip. It's nice to have something to fix that. And so those are the actual 10 C's of survivability, but I added 11. 11 is, which happens to start with the C, communications. And since we know that communications will most likely be down, I want that ability to communicate, hence the number 11. So let's talk about HTs for a second. There's a lot of different HT models and styles and price ranges. In my opinion, the one that is best is the one that you use and the one that you know how to use. Things that kind of would be nice to whatever radio you have. Let's talk about your radio gear for a second. So first of all, minimum, it should be an HT, preferably a dual bander with the Salt Lake County Aries load. And I am including that because that will give you all the repeaters and what they are used for in a disaster. Okay. So having that Salt Lake County Aries load is, in my opinion, critical. One thing you may consider for your HT is how water resistant is it and how rugged is it? There are some radios that I would not take out into a fog because it might ruin it. Other radios I can, run in my swimming pool. So you probably you don't need the latter, but you certainly don't want the first one either. So you want something that is rugged and water resistant. There's antenna considerations, including height and size. So we've all built the little J-pole 300 ohm antenna, and we know how well that works. Just by getting it up in the air, it makes your rubber ducky antenna into, it's as if you're talking on a 100-watt radio when all you're talking on is a 5-watt radio. Why? Because you've raised your antenna up and you've added gain to your antenna. If you don't have that, like a Dr. Fong antenna or one that we made, having a high gain rubber ducky. The thing that you do not want to have is probably the antenna that came with the radio. I have those just for in case everything else breaks. I still have that. So that's going to be what I use when all else fails. Also, there's power considerations. Will your radio accept AA batteries? Do you have something to charge your radio? How about a solar panel? How about extra battery packs? Consider taking, you need to assume that you're going to need to recharge your radio, especially when you're days away from your home. So the question is, can I pack everything in a portable get-home bag, or will I need my vehicle? And that's something you're going to have to answer yourself. So that's kind of the presentation of, let me stop sharing here. Okay. That's kind of what I had. I'd like a little discussion on, what do you think of, what do you think you'll be doing? You think you'll be doing a bug out bag, or you think you'll be setting up a get home bag? What's your take on it?
Well, my luck, it'll probably be a get home bag, and I got to come from Provo.
Say that one more time.
I say mine will probably be a get home bag because I'll probably be stuck in Provo and the land of Zion. So yeah, it might be a little bit harder. It might take me that week to get home. You never know because the freeway is not going to be passable. Not like you're going to jump on the freeway and drive home.
Right. As a matter of fact, I've heard instances where somebody after a 7.3 earthquake, they were trying to find their way home, and this is in an urban environment, and the landscape looked completely different. He could not navigate by the streets and by the things that you typically do. Now, because we're in the mountains, it would have to be an awfully big earthquake for the Wasatch Front to sink. If that were to happen, then all of this is a moot point. We'll see everybody on the other side. But if it's a 7.0 earthquake, the Wasatch Front is going to be there. The Ochre Mountains are going to be there. You at least know where north, south, east, and west is without a compass, right? But when you're traveling long distances, having a compass and being able to navigate, like where the point of the mountain is. I don't want to be heading towards the point of the mountain because I know I can't cross it. I need to go to the west. And
yeah, I might go through Lehigh and come down Redwood Road.
Yeah.
Something like that.
There's
Or follow the front runner tracks.
Oh yeah,
The rail corridor might be a good way because it goes right along the river.
And whether or not it is intact, you'll still be probably able to walk it, and at least it gives you a good direction to go.
Railroad right-of-ways are good because they're usually on a very controlled grade as well. So you're not like going up and down lots of hills, which can be a nightmare if you're going through town.
That changes when the big earthquake hits. There could
That's true. There could be brand new hills in a lot of different places that weren't there before, or
and
chasms as far as that goes.
But you could be approaching an 8-foot wall where the earth has shifted. So it can become very, very, very difficult.
Very true. Yes.
Getting home from work, I am on the other side of Jordan River. So, there's probably plenty of opportunities to get across, but if all the bridges are gone, then I might have a problem getting over.
Yeah. Yep. As a matter of fact, the river, who knows what it will look like after a big event like that. It may not be, your regular 50-foot crossing. It could have opened up, you just don't know. So that's another consideration for sure.
Yeah, see, in the times we're in right now, I will, depending on what time of the day, I might go west or east and stay away from the main corridor because it's easier to travel from point A to point B.
Right.
Just getting used to it, no more than one route.
Exactly. That's where your multiple plans come into effect. And especially when you're people who are gone, especially every day to work, I would talk with your loved ones to let them know this is the route that you're going to try to take. And this is the important part of, the ham radios. They don't care if there's an 8-foot wall. Having communication will be able to make a huge difference in that. Does everybody know the Murray City dedicated frequency for when the earthquake happens? That's in the safe neighborhood, but it's in the Salt Lake County load. It's 146,700 simplex. That is what is assigned to Murray City.
So Dan,
Yeah.
how much confidence do you have in the repeaters on the top of the mountains?
Many of them will survive.
How do we know which one?
Yeah, well, you don't. It's let's see.
And linked systems may be disrupted too, because the link antennas will be quite likely pointed in the wrong direction after an event.
Yep. Yep.
I would
Yeah.
think that KSL or Farnsworth, that peak would be, isn't that on solid rock up there?
Anything on the Wasatch Front, like the you know where the church has its records,
Yeah, the
Big
cave.
Conwood, Little Conwood Canyon. Yeah, it is one big chunk of granite. So that's why people are up there, is because on a huge earthquake, the whole mountain moves as a unit. So there's not gonna be a collapse like you would think would happen.
Right.
But that's completely different here in the valley. Here in the valley, we have liquefaction going on, liquefaction going on. It depends on where you live. West Valley is horrible for liquefaction. They have a real high, most of the buildings there will just sink into the ground on a large earthquake. A lot of Murray area, there's some good bedrock underneath of us, but it does show that probably it shows 80% of the homes here in the Murray area will be moderately damaged versus on the Wasatch Front and those rich homes up there. Those are all bye-bye.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's what you get for building on the side of a mountain.
that's right. On top of a fault, for goodness sakes. Okay, good stuff. Any other comments?
So I grew up in Montana, and one of the things that we were taught at an early age, when we started driving driver's ed, we were taught to always prepare in a winter situation. You never know what you're going to be getting into, so always have a blanket, always have, a candle or something like that. Always carry a shovel in your car, because you never know what you might get into, and blizzard can happen in a hurry whether you're expecting it or not. And I've even driven in rain where it was so heavy rain that I could not see the front of the hood of my car. And you get to the point where it gets like that, and you just say, okay, I'm going to pull over and stop, because
You're going to hit somebody.
I will hit something without even being able to have a chance of seeing it.
Yep.
And so you can find yourself in situations where, if you're not prepared for it, if you are prepared for it, you'll be fine. If you're not prepared for it, you could be dead.
Jim Phillips has a saying. He says, if you're prepared, then life will be an adventure. If you're not prepared, then you're in a heap of trouble.
Okay, Dan, another question for you.
Before you ask that question, I want to kind of a tailcoat onto the last comment with the vehicles. And I want everybody to think about always filling their car up with fuel so that they're never less than half full. Because when the earthquake happens, you don't go to a gas station. Those pumps will be not working, okay? So it's good to have that anyway. Steve, go ahead, sorry.
So you've got your radios, you got your UHF, VHF. Are we talking about carrying an HF as well?
Well, no, that's why that slide said layering, comms layering. The most important thing is the local communications, which is UHF, VHF. There are some HF radios that are portable, that have battery packs that would fit into that. So if you have the capability, you could plan on it. For me, I have my Go kit that has an HF radio in there, and I would take that, but I'm going to put that in my truck or in my Jeep. I can probably get through most things with my truck. Some things, it just depends on how bad it is. I may not be able to.
If you can't get through stuff with your truck, like you said before, we got bigger problems.
Yeah. So, having a four-wheel drive obviously helps out a lot. And the more clearance you get, you know, that certainly helps. But I'm going to assume that my truck will get me to home, or if I have to bug out, I'm going up to my property, and you guys won't see me anymore.
Well, that's where I'm going. I'm
If the
going
zo-
up.
Yeah, when the zombie apocalypse happens, I'm going up to my property.
You know, another thing too, is if you have access to your propane tank, always keep it full, because that way you can still cook on a portable cooker. Along with, we got a wood burning cooker. So if we didn't have propane, we could cook with wood.
Yes, and I guarantee you, right after the 7.0 earthquake or greater, there's going to be a lot of firewood. A lot of houses are going to be collapsed, and you know, my house might be one of them. That's one of the it's one of those things where, you know, I even have earthquake insurance on my house. That may or may not be important to anybody, but you know, assuming that we can recover from the earthquake, and assuming that State Farm doesn't go out of business, some insurance companies go out of business after a catastrophic event. Just ask people at down in when Hurricane
New
Katrina happened.
Orleans.
Yeah, it was a mess.
As
So-
far as the earthquake insurance, a friend of mine told me that, you know, he didn't bother with the earthquake experience insurance because if it shakes, it bakes. So
If it shakes, it bakes. As
yeah,
in, like what
as
would
in
you mean?
he'll have a fire if there's a bad enough earthquake that it destroys the house.
Yeah.
So,
And see, in my case, because my house is over 110 years old, it doesn't have modern foundation. So,
Right.
so the first thing I'm doing is I'm going to get it out of the house.
Yeah. Yeah. So
so dragging us back to communications.
Yes.
One thing, you know, I'm the only ham radio operator in my family, but I have made sure that my other family members know how to turn on the radio, how to find the frequency, and, you know, tune the radio to a particular repeater or whatever, and how to listen for me if I'm trying to contact them, and how to talk to me in case, you know, even if they're not licensed, if it's an emergency, bona fide emergency, they are allowed to use the radio. So that is something that you want to consider, is if you have other family members who are not radio operators, it wouldn't hurt to show them how the radio works and teach them how to turn it on and how to use it, so that you can get in touch with them if you need.
I'm glad you brought that up, Jan, because I think it's very it would be a very valuable thing to have an HT in a with an extra battery and an instruction sheet on turn on the radio, turn it to channel 3, say this, you know.
We had that presentation by the ham radio crash course guy
Yep.
that we watched a while back, and that was one of the things that he had was a little plastic or glass, you know, Pyrex type box with a waterproof lid, that he had a radio and a little card, an instruction card that said, if something happens, do this. Step 1, turn the radio on. Step 2, flip to channel 1. Step 3, at the top of every hour or every, you know, whatever time frequency often it was, turn it on and listen. And when you hear me push, do this to talk, right? So
Right.
giving your family members just that much of an understanding of how to use the equipment is going to be a good idea, because, you know, I know my wife is unlikely to pick up the radio and talk on it, but my son will if it's a condition like that. So, you know, if he's got a radio, and I'll make sure he has one at the house where he's likely to be. And, you know, if you've got one in your vehicle, make sure that everybody who's with you knows how to work it in case something happens. So even if they're not a licensed operator, they can use that radio in an emergency situation.
Yep. Now, speaking of, Steve kind of brought up the question, you know, how do we know which repeaters will survive? We don't. That is why in the Salt Lake County Areas Safe Neighborhood section, where all the cities, they typically will have a repeater frequency to talk on and a simplex frequency, because we're going to assume that the repeaters are not operational. Also know that Murray City, we will shortly have our 220, our own 220 repeater up and running. Now, whether or not that survives the earthquake, who knows? We'll see how good that tower is. But don't forget FRS and GMRS radio technology. They are going to be alive, because everybody and their dog will, has an FRS radio in the neighborhoods. And if your neighborhood is aware of like CERT, we need to get more people involved with CERT. For example, if all of my neighbors were let me see if I can say this again. If all of my neighbors knew the CERT program, and if they all went through the CERT program, it would make things a whole lot easier, because everybody would know what to do. I'm afraid there's going to be way too many victims and not enough people to help when the big one hits. As a matter of fact, I know that the case, because that's the way it always is. So, I mean, that's why I got my license in the first place. I want to be part of the problem. You've part of the problem. I want to be part of the solution. I don't want to be a victim. And all of us with ham radios can be part of the solution. And I know that regardless of where you're at, and this probably, I'm running out of time, but it's probably worth mentioning that we ought to have a presentation on the Murray Amateur Radio Club protocol during a disaster.
So speaking of which, I just put a link in the chat to our ECOMS protocol page from the website. I think we need to update that, because I don't think the frequencies in there are accurate. I think these were selected before the Salt Lake County Areas standardization was done. So we probably ought to go through that page and make sure that that's up to date before we start talking about it too much.
Okay, cool.
I have something.
Sure.
Wasn't there a few of us that checked in last year for the earthquake? Was that on the county? I think a few of us checked in, didn't they?
Yes. Yep. There's probably a half dozen of us that called in and said, "Yeah, we're be on standby." I think was the.
Well, is the county, so if something goes on and in the county, we have our frequency, but we have a county frequency also, right?
We have Murray City has been assigned a simplex frequency, and we use, and one of the frequencies that were assigned, that we assigned ourselves, is the Murray Fire Department frequency, the 220, when we get that up and running. And I believe we have a where'd everybody go? Oh, for Pete's sakes.
We're all still here.
Okay.
I'm here.
Good. We should have, let me bring up the standard load here.
We're rapidly approaching your hard stop, Dan. So
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I'm okay.
if you want to save it
Murray.
till next time, we can do that. I mean, I'm fine with that. So
Okay, our simplex is 147.600. That is assigned to Murray. and no one else can touch that. Consequently, we can't touch other simplex frequencies out there. So this is why having the standard load is going to be important. Anyway, guys, it's been fun. Please send myself or Jan or anybody else who would be in the know any questions on this we can take up for later discussion, but I have to go. So
Thanks for the presentation.
I'm going to stop
Thanks,
the
everybody.
recording.
Thank you. It was good. I enjoyed